The guard and the girl behind bars. The first time. Officer Maya Chen saw prisoner. 47829 through the reinforced glass, she felt something crack open inside her. Chest that she'd spent years trying to seal shut. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Maya had built her entire career on discipline, on following every rule in the handbook, on maintaining that impenetrable wall between authority and those under her watch. But when Elena Reyes looked up from her bunk with those dark, haunted eyes that somehow still held fragments of hope, Maya understood that some forces in this world don't care about regulations or the uniforms we wear to protect ourselves from feeling too much. Elena had been at Riverside Women's Correctional for 8 months when Maya transferred to the facility. The younger woman was serving a 3-year sentence for a crime that had made local headlines, a desperate act born from trying to protect someone she loved from a violent partner. Maya had read the case file a dozen times, each reading revealing new layers of tragedy. Elena had taken the fall for her girlfriend at the time, a woman who had abandoned her the moment the handcuffs clicked into place. The betrayal had been complete, absolute, the kind that reshapes a person's understanding of trust and love, and what it means to sacrifice yourself for someone who was never going to do the same. Maya's routine became synchronized with Elena's in ways that felt both accidental and inevitable. During morning counts, her eyes would find Elena automatically, checking that she was safe, that she'd made it through. Another night in a place that tried to strip away humanity with fluorescent lights and concrete walls. During yard time, Maya positioned herself where she could observe. Elena sitting alone under the single oak tree, reading worn paperbacks that other inmates passed along. There was something about the way Elena held those books, cradling them like precious artifacts, that made Maya's heart constrict with an ache she couldn't name. The professional distance Maya had maintained with every other inmate began eroding in small, dangerous increments. It started with an extra book from the library cart, left on Elena's bunk during cell inspections. Then a blind eye turned when Elena stayed in the chapel 5 minutes past the allowed time, her lips moving in silent prayers or confessions or conversations with a version of herself that might have existed in a different life. Maya told herself these were acts of basic human kindness, nothing more than what any decent person would do for someone, clearly suffering behind bars. But late at night in her own apartment, staring at her ceiling, Maya knew she was lying to herself with every rationalization. The shift happened on a Tuesday in October when Maya found Elena in the bathroom with blood dripping from her knuckles and tears streaming down her face. Another inmate had made a cruel comment about Elena being abandoned, about being stupid enough to take the fall for someone who didn't love her. The fight had been brief but vicious, and now Elena sat on the cold tile floor looking utterly broken. All that careful composure she maintained finally shattered. Maya should have written her up immediately, should have called for backup and followed protocol, exactly as written in the manual that lived in her back pocket. Instead, she locked the bathroom door, grabbed the first aid kit, and knelt down beside Elena with her heart hammering against her ribs. As Maya cleaned Elena's wounds with gentle, practiced movements, their eyes met in a moment of such raw vulnerability that it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff with the wind pushing from behind. Elena's breath hitched, and she whispered the first personal words she'd ever spoken to Maya, thanking her not for the medical attention but for seeing her as a human being, rather than just a number on a cell door. Maya's hand trembled as she wrapped the bandage, her fingers brushing against Elena's skin in a touch that lasted 1 second too long to be purely professional. In that bathroom with its flickering lights and smell of industrial cleaner, something fundamental shifted between them, an acknowledgement that couldn't be taken back, no matter how much safer it would have been to pretend it never happened. The following weeks became an exercise in exquisite torture for Maya. Every shift felt like walking a tightrope, strung between duty and desire, between the career she'd built and the feelings that grew stronger with each passing day. She started finding excuses to patrol the section where Elena's cell was located, memorizing the rhythm of her breathing as she slept, the way she'd sit, cross-legged on her bunk writing letters that she never sent to anyone. During meals, Maya would watch Elena from across the cafeteria, noting how she'd give away half her portions to the younger inmates who never seemed to have enough. There was a fundamental goodness in Elena that prison hadn't managed to corrupt, a core of compassion that made Maya question everything she thought she knew about justice and punishment and who really belonged behind these walls. Elena began leaving small signs that she felt the connection to. A sketch of a bird in flight, drawn on the back of a commissary receipt and left where only Maya would find it during cell inspection. Eye contact held just a fraction longer during head counts, carrying entire conversations in the space of a heartbeat. Once, during a power outage that plunged the facility into temporary chaos, Elena had reached out in the darkness and their fingers had touched. A brief connection that felt like coming home to a place Maya had never known existed. Neither of them acknowledged it afterward. But Maya felt the ghost of that touch for days, an imprint that no amount of denial could erase. The impossibility of their situation weighed on Maya like chains far heavier than the ones Elena wore during transport. She lay awake calculating the destruction that would follow if anyone discovered what was building between them. She'd lose her job immediately, face possible criminal charges, become a cautionary tale whispered in training, academies about officers who crossed the line. Her family would be devastated. Her mother, who'd been so proud when Maya graduated from the academy. Her younger brother, who still looked up to her as the one who'd made something of herself. But even knowing all this, even understanding the logical reasons to stop before things went further, Maya couldn't seem to make her heart follow the rules that her head knew by memory. The breaking point came during a facility-wide lockdown after a violent incident in another wing. For 18 hours, everyone was confined to cells while officers conducted searches and investigations. Maya worked a double shift, exhausted and running on coffee and adrenaline. And when she finally made her rounds past Elena's cell in the early morning hours, she found the younger woman pressed against the bars, with tears streaming down her face. Elena had heard rumors that the violence was related to her case, that someone she'd once known was involved, and the trauma of her past had crashed into her present with devastating force. Maya stopped walking, her body making the decision before her mind could intervene, and she reached through the bars to take Elena's hand. They stood like that for nearly an hour in the dim emergency lighting, hands clasped through the steel bars, Maya murmuring words of comfort while Elena's shoulders shook with silent sobs. It was the most dangerous thing Maya had ever done in her career, standing there openly offering comfort that crossed every boundary she was sworn to maintain. Other officers walked past, but the chaos of the lockdown provided cover. Everyone too focused on their assigned tasks to notice one guard and one inmate having a moment of human connection in the shadows. When Elena finally calmed down and whispered that Maya should go before someone noticed, Maya squeezed her hand one last time and felt something click into place. An understanding that there was no going back to pretending this was nothing. The internal battle that followed nearly destroyed Maya from the inside out. She called in sick for 3 days. The first time she'd ever missed work for anything other than a death in the family. She sat in her apartment, drinking too much wine and staring at the certification on her wall that proclaimed her commitment to upholding the law and protecting the public trust. She thought about transferring to another facility, about requesting a different assignment, about running away from feelings that had grown too powerful to control. But every time she imagined not seeing Elena again, not being there to make sure she was safe and as okay as anyone could be in prison, the thought felt like suffocation. When Maya returned to work, she made a decision that terrified her, but felt like the only honest choice available. She started documenting everything about Elena's case, all the inconsistencies in the investigation, the coerced confession, the overworked public defender who'd barely mounted a defense. Maya spent her off hours researching appeals processes and wrongful conviction cases, reaching out anonymously to advocacy groups that specialized in cases where domestic violence victims ended up criminalized for trying to protect themselves. It wasn't love expressed through stolen moments or forbidden touches. It was love expressed through action, through using whatever power and privilege Maya had to fight for justice that Elena had been denied. 6 months into Maya's quiet investigation, something remarkable happened. A legal aid organization agreed to review Elena's case after Maya had compiled a comprehensive package of evidence and analysis. They found grounds for appeal based on ineffective counsel, and new interpretations of laws protecting domestic violence victims. The process would take time, possibly years, but for the first time since entering Riverside, Elena had something more powerful than Maya's contraband books or kind glances. She had hope rooted in actual possibility. The day the legal team came to meet with Elena, Maya watched from a distance as the young woman's entire body language transformed. The defeated slump of her shoulders straightened into something resembling strength. The carefully blank expression she wore as armor cracked to reveal the intelligent, passionate person underneath. After the meeting, Elena found a way to pass Maya a note during dinner service. Just 3 words scrawled on a napkin. "You did this." Maya tucked that napkin into her locker and understood that this was what love looked like when you couldn't touch, couldn't speak freely, couldn't build a life in any conventional sense. It was seeing someone's full humanity when the system tried to reduce them to a number, and then doing everything in your power to help them reclaim their freedom. The appeals process moved with agonizing slowness, each court date and filing bringing fresh waves of hope and crushing disappointment. Maya learned to live in a constant state of suspended possibility, maintaining her professional composure while her heart followed every development. In Elena's case, with an intensity that surprised her. Other officers noticed she'd become quieter, more introspective, but they attributed it to stress or burnout rather than the truth. Maya had fallen in love with an inmate, and instead of pursuing something forbidden and ultimately destructive, she'd channeled that love into fighting for justice through the only legitimate means available. 14 months after Maya first contacted the legal aid organization, Elena's conviction was overturned. The courtroom scene was something Maya watched from the public gallery, having taken a personal day to be present for the moment. That felt like the culmination of everything. When the judge declared Elena free to go, citing overwhelming evidence of a coerced confession and failure to consider domestic violence context, Elena's eyes immediately found Maya's in the crowded room. The look that passed between them contained volumes. An entire relationship lived in glances and restrained touches in love, expressed through boundaries honored rather than crossed. Maya didn't approach Elena that day or in the weeks that followed. It wouldn't have been appropriate, wouldn't have been safe for either of them while the situation was still fresh and scrutinized. But 3 months later, Maya received a letter at her home address, written in the familiar handwriting she'd seen on those unsent letters Elena used to write on her bunk. The note was simple and profound, thanking Maya for seeing her as a complete person when everyone else saw only a criminal, for fighting for her freedom without expecting anything in return, for showing her that love could be both powerful and respectful of boundaries. Elena included her phone number with no pressure, no expectation, just an invitation to continue knowing each other in a world where steel bars no longer separated them. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe in the power of love that respects boundaries while still fighting for what's right, if you felt the ache of caring for someone in an impossible situation, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that real love sometimes means making sacrifices for another person's well-being rather than our own immediate desires. Your engagement helps these stories reach people who need them most. Maya held that letter for a long time, reading it over and over, feeling the weight of choices made and roads not taken and the strange, beautiful possibility of what might come next. She'd spent 2 years loving Elena from behind the boundaries of her uniform and her professional ethics, and now those boundaries had shifted into something new. There would be complications, certainly. Judgment from people who couldn't understand how connections form in unexpected places. Questions about whether relationships, born in such unequal power dynamics, could ever be healthy once that dynamic changed. But as Maya picked up her phone and carefully typed out a message, introducing herself properly, for the first time as just Maya rather than Officer Chen, she felt something settle in her chest that had been restless for years. Before we reach the end of this journey, I want to ask you something special. In the comments below, please share just one word that describes what this story made you feel. Just one word, nothing more. Let's create a tapestry of emotions together that shows how these kinds of stories connect us all. The story of Maya and Elena didn't end with a prison release or a perfect romantic reunion. It ended with 2 women who'd survived impossible circumstances choosing to explore what they might mean to each other in a world where power was more equally distributed, where conversation could happen freely, where touch wasn't forbidden but rather earned through patience and genuine care. They met for coffee 6 weeks after that first text message, sitting across from each other in a quiet cafe where no bars separated them and no regulations governed how long they could look into each other's eyes. Elena wore a blue dress that made her look younger, less haunted, though the shadows of what she'd survived would always be part of her story. Maya came in civilian clothes, nervous in a way she'd never been in uniform, vulnerable without the armor of her badge and her authority. They talked for 4 hours about everything and nothing, building a foundation not on forbidden attraction but on mutual respect and the strange bond formed by someone fighting for your freedom when they had nothing to gain, except the knowledge that they'd done the right thing. And when they finally left that cafe as the sun set over the city, Elena reached out tentatively and took Maya's hand, a touch that was freely given and freely received, and they walked together into an uncertain future that held something neither of them had truly believed possible during all those months of separated longing. They walked into the possibility of love without barriers, of connection built on equality rather than power, of two people learning each other's hearts, not through stolen moments, but through the honest, sometimes difficult, always worthwhile work of building something real in the light rather than in the shadows. That was the real ending, not perfect or simple, but true in the way that real love stories are always true, messy and complicated and achingly beautiful, in their stubborn refusal to be anything other than exactly what they are.